Thank you all so much for being here and welcome to this Conservation Stewardship Program info session. My name is Jennifer Byrne. I'm the district manager of the White River Natural Resource Conservation District. And I'm going to turn it over to the three Farmers Alliance chairs and presidents to introduce themselves and their group and just give a welcome and a little bit of info on who you are and who you represent would be great and why we're here. Paul, do you want to start?
Sure. I appreciate how many people are on here. It's easy to do it at short notice and people won't forget. People are in my age bracket, right, Eric? I'm representing Connecticut River Watershed Farmers Alliance. We're on the eastern part of the state. We're more involved in nitrogen than we are in phosphorus, but we keep track of both. I'm Paul Doughton, have a small dairy farm in Barnard, which watershed that we're with is the Ottaquechee River watershed, although our town is in the White River watershed, so we're just the southern part of this town. If you remember, most of you, 5 years ago, our three groups went to Montpelier and testified, gave some push to figuring a way to pay farmers to do what we do now, which is to keep the environment in good shape. 4 years ago, the Payment for Ecosystem Services and Soil Health Working Group was formed. All three of us who are chairs or presidents of our watershed groups were part of that. I want to also, before we even start, thank both Ryan and Travis for their efforts in this meeting tonight and in the watershed groups and in the working group. With that, I won't take up more time than I need to. Brian, are you next?
Sure. I'm Brian Kemp. I'm president of the Champlain Valley Farmer Coalition, and our group is located, as it states, in the Champlain Valley, covering Addison, Rutland, Chittenden County, and even I think we have a member or two from Orleans County. And diversified group, primarily dairy, but beef, poultry, turkey, vegetables, even some beekeepers and some maple producers. Our membership's growing. We're up in the 70 plus active farmers in our membership now and supporting businesses. And our mission and goal is to improve the water and air quality in Vermont and keeping sustainable farms. And we have, as Paul said, myself has been part of the Payment for Ecosystem Services group, which, as you know, is being modeled with the CSP program. And that's why we're here tonight, to just help educate other farmers that are interested in the CSP program and learn more about it. So glad to be part of it. Thanks.
And Scott?
You ready, Scott?
I think so. My phone is stuck in safe driving mode, so my video is not working. But no, I just want to welcome all the farmers that are attending tonight. I'm the chair of the Farmers Watershed Alliance up in Franklin and Grand Isle County. We were part of, like Paul said, we were part of the movement, I guess, to look at things a little bit different and how we approach environmental programs and policy. And it was an interesting 3 years of discussion, which maybe didn't get us exactly where we wanted to go, but was where we needed to go for the time. And I think this process will evolve, and the pilot program is a way to have more conversation while farmers receive some compensation for the work that's being done.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I want to recognize, I also received a direct message from someone named Michael Clayton. I don't see him on the participant list, so I don't know what's going on with that, but don't click the link, please. And if you're a real person, please make yourself known. I'll continue to look for him and make sure that that's not but yeah, it very well may be a spam or something. So thank you all. I'm reposting the agenda in the chat. And I would like to also share a very short version of the report that the conservation districts, we held 5 conversations around the state. Many of you were involved in this back in 2021 to understand the farmers' desires for a program, a payment for ecosystem services program. And so I'll post a link in the chat, which is safe. So please do click it. And there's a full version of this report as well, but you'll see this is what largely informed our advocacy around the result of the PES working group, which is this enhancement to an existing program and moving away from a commercialization or financialization of nature. So I encourage you to take a look at that and reach out to me. I'll send you a copy of the full report. And with that said, we're going to hand it over to Heather from NRCS to give an overview of the federal CSP program and talk a little bit about the opportunity that's open now.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jennifer. And thank you for inviting me to talk about this program, CSP, the Conservation Stewardship Program. There are a number of funding opportunities with CSP. The latest opportunity uses the Inflation Reduction Act funding source, or IRA. The deadline to sign up for CSP IRA is April 21st. IRA funds are for climate smart agriculture, a more targeted suite of activities that CSP contracts funded through IRA can pay for. Your local service center can help you with those options of those climate smart activities. When you apply for CSP, you're submitting an application form, and a map of your entire operation, which usually includes a number of maps. When you sign a CSP contract, you are enrolling your entire operation into a 5-year contract. You are receiving a minimum of $1,500 per year for 5 years to maintain the conservation work that you're performing at the time you sign a contract, and for doing at least some additional conservation work on at least a part of your operation. In order to be eligible, you have to have FSA records after you submit your application form and your maps. If you don't have FSA records, you're sent over to the Farm Service Agency to establish those records. The land you enroll is in your entire operation, and there's agricultural land, and then there's non-industrial private forest land, and those two types don't compete with each other when it comes to funding. Agricultural land includes your cropland, which can be annually rotated crops, or it can be permanent perennial crops. It could be pasture, and also associated ag land, which are those little pieces of your farm that are part of your operation but aren't being used for agricultural production. So riparian areas, the piece behind your barn that's just all weeds, ditches, hedgerows, rock outcroppings, things like that. Then there's also farmstead, and then for non-industrial private forest land, there's the forest land itself, which could also have associated ag land, such as the riparian areas, or those smaller areas of open areas in a forest land that aren't being managed for forest production. And you could also potentially have a farmstead on the forest operation itself if that area was being used for agricultural production, such as a landing area. There is a cropping history requirement with CSP, which is why most brand new ag producers aren't eligible for CSP. The land has to be in production for 4 of the 6 years preceding December 2018. And the reason why that date is used is because December 2018 is the date that the 2018 Farm Bill was signed. So land has to be in production for 4 of the 6 years between December 2012 and December 2018. So that's why our brand new farmers who are starting to put land in production are not eligible for CSP. Land also has to comply with highly erodible land and wetland conservation determination provisions. And if you're unsure about whether or not your land meets those provisions, your local service center can help you and assist you with figuring that out. But generally speaking, if you are actively working with the Farm Service Agency or with the Natural Resource Conservation Service, and you have contracts with us, or you are receiving funds through FSA, you probably are in compliance. And then the final part of eligibility is stewardship threshold. This is sort of a score on the conservation work that you have done and that you're currently doing on your operation. This comes from the assessment that NRCS staff will work with you to complete. So it's a sort of like an interview process, and they're going to ask you a lot of questions about your operation, and you'll answer yes, no, medium, high, stuff like that. It'll take a little while if you don't have a familiarity with NRCS. However, if you're a producer who has active contracts with NRCS, you have an active working relationship with an NRCS employee, they probably know your farm well and as well as you do to be able to answer those questions for you. So from that assessment, it will score what is called a stewardship threshold for each resource: soil, water, plants, wildlife. And then from that, in order to be eligible for CSP, you need to meet 2 resource stewardship thresholds on all land uses in your operation. So if you have cropland and farmstead, you need to meet 2 resource stewardship thresholds on the cropland, and then 2 resource stewardship thresholds on the farmstead. If you don't, you're not eligible for CSP. You also need to install an activity on at least part of 1 land use by the end of the contract. If you don't want to install any activity, then that would make you ineligible for CSP. If you want to install an activity, but it's not a climate smart activity, then we'll defer your CSP IRA application to fiscal year 2024. And we'll contact you after October to see if you're interested in being considered in a different funding source called CSP Classic, which offers all CSP activities, not just the smaller suite of climate smart activities that are just for this CSP IRA money, where the application deadline is April 21st. So if you meet stewardship threshold eligibility and the other FSA, having FSA records on file and having land, and you're selected for funding, you'll receive an annual payment for each resource stewardship threshold that you've met, and an annual payment for the acres that you've enrolled for each land use on those land uses where you're going to install an additional climate smart activity. So you'll also receive money for installing the activity itself, but you will get that payment in the October after you complete the activity. For each land use where you meet at least 2 resource thresholds, in order to get paid for those, and it's $300 per each threshold met. In order to get paid for those, you have to agree to do something on that land use. So for example, if you have cropland and pastureland, and you meet 4 resource concerns on your pasture, and you meet 3 resource concerns on your cropland, if you only do 1 activity on your cropland, you won't get paid for the work for the resource concerns met on your other land uses unless you also agree to do a separate activity on those. So the more activities you agree to do on more land uses, the more funds you get. Some examples of climate smart activities include, but there's about 90 of them, so I'm just going to throw out like 4 or 5. Establishing wildlife corridors to provide habitat continuity or access to water. Establishing pollinator and or beneficial insect and or monarch habitat. Forest stand improvement using crop tree management techniques to increase mass production. There's also improving nutrient uptake efficiency and reducing risk of nutrient loss. And then cropland conversion to grass for soil organic matter improvement. You can find these a list of activities that are eligible for all CSP, regardless of the funding source, on the NRCS website, and you can find the NRCS, the national NRCS website, just by putting in your search engine, whether it's Google or Yahoo, NRCS, and it will send you straight there. And from there, you can go to programs, scroll down, and you'll see the link for the Conservation Stewardship Program. And then from there, you can find the list of 2023 enhancement job sheets. And those are that provides the more specific details as to what's required for each of the enhancements that are offered. Next steps, if you are interested in submitting an application, you can either go to farmers.gov and submit your application through that source. You can also contact your local service center and they can walk you through the application process. You can find your local service center by doing a Google or Yahoo search for VT NRCS. And from there, you would just go and click on contacts and then click on find a service center. And you'll be able to get, if you don't know already, you can get your local service center information that way. And if there are any questions or if we're going to wait to the end, thank you very much.
Thank you, Heather. I'm just going to put a link in the chat to what I think the list is. I did the scrolling and clicking. Can you confirm that that's, it doesn't say climate smart specifically. This is the list of enhancements for 2023. But if there's a different list, I'm not, maybe a link would be helpful. And we'll pass it over to Ryan.
Still muted. Thanks, Jennifer. Appreciate it. Ryan Patch with the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food and Markets. I'm going to share a PowerPoint briefly just to walk us through the website, which houses the agency's portion, Agency of Agriculture's portion of this program. So excited after a lot of hard work by the PES working group to arrive at not a new program, right? CSP's been around for a while. But it is, really, as Heather outlined, a new opportunity with all of the additional Inflation Reduction Act funding that's now available. And so there are, it's a two-part program, right? You're going to have to apply to both NRCS CSP program, and then you're going to have to apply to the Agency of Agriculture. The formal name, the Vermont Farmers Ecosystem Stewardship Program, we're calling CSP Assist for ease of understanding in this initial rollout. Folks may be aware, you apply to EQIP to do your structural practices, you apply to BMT Assist at the Agency of Ag to help fill in the gaps that may exist in some of the funding parameters that exist in the federal program. So this is a similar companion program where NRCS and their CSP program is the primary source of funding and planning for this program, and the Agency of Ag is there to help support farmer time that it takes to go through, as you learned or heard, a rather extensive interview and planning process to even see if you're eligible for the program. And so for those reasons, kind of as a transition into CSP that hasn't been widely subscribed in the agricultural sector in Vermont, the goal is to, A, raise awareness that this program exists, and to help fill some gaps that may exist on the farmer side as far as effort that's needed to actually take the steps to apply, do the planning, and enroll, and then to also offer some upfront financial incentive similar to the CREP program, but just to acknowledge the good work that's going to happen over the 5 years of the CSP agreement, but to front load some of the financial assistance that may be needed to implement some of those practices. So I through our discussions, I think Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP, can work for farms that, may want to do more than what the Agency of Ag's FAP program allows, right? You can cap out pretty quickly between grazing and some rotational grazing and some cover crop or some crop rotation, right? You can hit our $8,000, $9,000 cap pretty quickly. And depending on the year and where you're located in the state, EQIP will prioritize, the more serious resource concerns. And so CSP exists as a program, in my view, which can help support good, if you're managing your farm to a high degree of management and, compliant with RAPs and, looking for some consistent support with the conservation practices you're already implementing, CSP can be a pretty good fit to support existing ongoing planning, with the caveat that you are going to have to do a couple enhancements on some fields. And so if you are either frustrated with not being able to do as much as you would like through the Agency of Ag FAP program, or you're not getting funded to the degree you want in EQIP, this could be something to explore and look at for your farm operation. But acknowledging it may not be for everyone, but it's certainly worth taking a look as there is significant funding opportunity in this program over the next 5 years. So I am going to share my screen real quick if I can. See, I think folks can now see
Yes.
screen. Super, thank you. Here's the title: Vermont Farmers Ecosystem Stewardship Program. It's a companion.
Monday afternoon.
This is basically just kind of the summary of the principles of the program, right? NRCS has the existing framework. It's a threshold program where they're doing planning through the Conservation Assessment Ranking Tool. The CSP Assist program, the Vermont Farmer Ecosystem Stewardship Program, will pay both for planning upfront as well as upfront payments for future implementation in the program. It's designed to provide farmers flexibility, meaning you get to choose the practices that you adopt. It doesn't prescribe on this field you have to do this enhancement or this enhancement. It's an iterative collaborative planning process with a conservation planner at NRCS, and it enables you as the farmer to select which conservation practices you want to plan for. And just acknowledging that this is, a pilot. We're going to run this for 2 years. And so when we talk about the deadlines, if you need more time to consider the program, know that next year's application rounds through NRCS will also be able to participate in the state companion program, the CSP Assist program. So the deadline's coming up pretty soon. And so if you're interested, but you want to do more looking, next year's fine as well. But we do encourage you to sign up and get your name in the queue if you are interested in doing the planning. So this is the website at the top of the slide here, agriculturevermont.gov/CSP Assist. I'll drop it in the chat after this brief presentation, but I'm just going to walk you through basically what's on that webpage, and you can refer back to it at a future time. But essentially, we have some resources that were shared with by NRCS, which includes you can go directly to the NRCS CSP homepage here. And then they also have a fact sheet or checklist where you can ask yourself some questions about your farm to see if it does fit into the program framework as NRCS presents it. And then if you're really interested and wanted to do some reading and learning some more background about all that led to the development of the CSP Assist program, the Vermont Farmers Ecosystem Stewardship Program, you can go to the Payment for Ecosystem Services and Soil Health Working Group webpage, where the final report is there, and you can dig into all sorts of resources that may exist if you have more questions about, how did this program come to be, and what else was considered. All that's housed at that portion of the website. But again, taking a look at CSP from the NRCS perspective is definitely a good place to start, as that is the core of this program. To apply. So this is to apply for the Agency of Agriculture portion of this joint programming. There is the opportunity to apply both online. So you can just click the link on the left and it'll take you to a digital online way to submit your information to the Agency of Ag, and we'll use that to coordinate with NRCS and get you into our program. Or, as always, you can print and submit that, either scanning it and emailing back to us, or just snail mail fine too. We're still checking mail, of course. So that's also housed on this web page down a little bit further. But just to talk about kind of the short timeline that we're under for CSP applications. If you applied last fall in 2022, or if you applied before April 21st, by filling out a CSP application with USDA and NRCS Vermont, those two cohorts will be considered for this first year of this CSP Assist program. And it will, if you apply in the next federal fiscal year, you will also be eligible for this CSP Assist program. So if you already applied, you're welcome to apply for CSP Assist. And if you apply next year, you'll also be eligible. One thing I wanted to highlight for this April 21st, and something you may need to get a move on if you don't already have records established, is you got to establish your records with FSA. And that can take a bit of time and some conversation. So if you're not already participating in USDA programs, it'd be a good idea to get down to your local field office as soon as possible. So April 21st is the NRCS application deadline. Our Agency of Ag deadline will be the 8th of May to submit the authorization form to us. The middle of May, end of May, I suppose, is when farmers will need to finish their planning with the local NRCS office. And then NRCS has set a timeline for themselves of around June 23rd to get the CSP agreements in place. So this year, a lot crunched in between now and June. And I'll talk about where the payments from the Agency of Ag program being fits into this timeline. But remember, the bulk of the potential payments likely will come from the NRCS side of the CSP program. If you're already in the Conservation Stewardship Program, let's say you're on year 4 of your CSP Ag agreement. So these are just Ag agreements. You're welcome to apply for both agriculture and all the associated lands and forest lands. But we're only through this program at this time supporting the Ag application. So you can definitely apply and enroll your forest land if you'd like, if it's eligible and you meet the criteria, et cetera, et cetera. But this is just for the ag contract. So if you already have an existing ag contract, you are eligible for a $3,500 payment, which you need to apply similarly before May 8th. And it won't have the practice incentive payments because you've already been implementing your plan, but it will compensate you for both the contract incentive and the payment, the planning payment that's available for the CSP Assist program. And then again, NRCS continues to pay on their timeline. So I'm going to take just a second. I'm a visual learner. I learn through charts and graphs and diagrams. I don't know if this is really a good diagram, but it can help hopefully elucidate how these two programs work together. So what you have on the screen in front of you is not from NRCS, it's from a third party, Sustainable Agriculture website, talking about the different steps in CSP, but it aligns close enough to what you can expect to find when you apply for CSP and move through the planning process. And basically where we're talking about now is, filling out a CSP application form. That is something that you got to do first and foremost if you want to participate. The Payment for Ecosystem Services and Soil Health Working Group has charged the agency to put out requests for proposals to support the technical assistance for this program. And so that grant is not yet out yet, but it will be out soon. But the goal is to have additional technical assistance support for later this year, as well as all of next year, and then a little bit into the following year to support farmers in all areas of the state to troubleshoot, coordinate, answer questions. And so we'll be working to get those technical assistance resources on the ground, but they're not yet in place. So that's something we're working on at the Agency of Ag. So in the CSP program, right, you fill an application, you're going to need to read and learn about the enhancements you need to agree to, and then as Heather mentioned, you got to do that interview and the planning with your conservation planner so that your application can be ranked within their process. And the first opportunity for financial assistance from the state program is at the close of planning. Right, let's say you take this time, you apply, or let's say you establish records, you apply, you go through the interview process, and it comes back, you're missing a few of the criteria on your pastures, right? Some of your crop rotations need to be changed if you want to exceed the thresholds in the CSP program. So maybe you should work on planning that and come back next year. Well, that's sometimes not an incentive to go through all that effort and realize, oh, I'm not eligible for the program this year. And so this, regardless of where you end up in the conservation planning process, whether you're eligible for CSP or not, the Agency of Ag CSP Assist program will provide what we're calling a planning completion payment. So you do the planning, you're going to be eligible for a $2,000 payment regardless of acreage and regardless of the outcome of that planning. So if you still need to do some work, that's fine. Come back when you're ready. And there will also be, just because you're not eligible for CSP this year doesn't mean that you're not eligible for the existing conservation programs that are available, whether it's through state, federal, nonprofit, or other programs that may exist out there. So just know that there are opportunities besides CSP. So that's the first intervention. After you go through all that planning and your application's ranked, you've got to finalize that plan and sign an agreement, a contract with NRCS. And that's going to deliver, if you sign that agreement with NRCS, that's going to provide a minimum of a $1,500 payment. And then the balance of the funds will be divided between all applicants that go into the program. And so there'll be another slide to explain that. But then, over the 5 years, you carry out the plan, you do the reporting, and NRCS provides that annual payment that between the enhancements and the standard base payments, et cetera, that'll be something that'll be reoccurring, provided you implement the plan and you continue to meet the standards. So farms that just do the planning, eligible for $2,000 payment. Those that do the planning, sign a contract, will receive between $3,500 and up to $9,500 per farm. Basically, what the working group designed was flat payments for contract incentives and planning completion payments, and then however many applications that is, the balance of the funding that exists will be divided between all the other applicants as a practice incentive payment. So it'll come before the end of your CSP agreement, and it will be a division of the balance of the funds amongst all of the existing, all of those farmers that sign a contract and move into implementation. And we expect that to be between $1,500 and $6,000 in total payment. And as I mentioned, those farmers that have already signed up for Ag CSP are eligible for a $3,500 payment to reflect the work they've already done through planning and signing the contract. And yeah, so I'll stop rambling now. CSP Assist website is here, and the PES website is here as well if you want to learn more about the PES process. So I appreciate everyone being here, and here to looking forward to trying to answer some questions, and hope you'll take a look at the CSP program, as we think it's a good next step for Vermont agriculture. Right, it can provide consistent payments over a 5-year period, while enabling you to continue to steward your lands as you have been, while doing modest enhancement practices on some of your fields. So I'd encourage folks to take a look at it. It may take some specific planning. We know in Vermont there are certainly some rotation. You got to make sure it is a 5-year agreement, so making sure the planning is done thoroughly is something to really consider in the program. So just a reason why the working group wanted to make sure that farmers are compensated for all the planning time it takes to get a full CSP contract in place that's going to work for your farm. So that's where that planning agreement came from. So appreciate the opportunity to share that information.
Thank you very much, Ryan. And we will move into questions. Feel free to either, just raise your hand if you know how to raise your hand in Zoom, or, you can just speak out and we'll hear you. So I'm just going to open it up.
Hi, Ryan. This is Dave Conant speaking. We have been, as a coalition member, I'm not speaking for the coalition, but I'm speaking for myself. But we've been reviewing the programs that are put before us here, and the opportunities we have to be able to take advantage of these programs to benefit the general public, if you will, and ourselves also. But one of the major hurdles that we see is to be able to navigate all of these programs, and not only that, but to understand them. And I think as you were speaking, as all of you were speaking, I just kind of jotted down the acronyms, and we look at ESP and CSP and EQIP and FAP and PFP, which was payment for phosphorus, and now is payment for performance, and the PES and PCP and CIP and PIP. Quite frankly, I am totally lost. And we have been involved with the state agency for a very long time, and also closely do programs with NRCS. And I think it's going to be very difficult for many of us to navigate these programs. So my question to you all is, where does all this help come from? And where does the time come from? More important, where does the time come from to be able to understand and know which and what programs are best for our individual farms. So if somebody could expand on that, then I'd appreciate it.
Sure.
Thank you.
I'd be happy to take a first crack at that. I think that's definitely an observation that the way I'd like to frame it is there's a lot of opportunities for agriculture right now. The funding that has existed in the past has not been to the scale that currently exists, and designing programs that meet the varied needs of Vermont agriculture between sectors and different sizes of farms has really, and the different funding sources that have different restrictions, is kind of what's left us with this alphabet soup. And absent, that in this space it is certainly complicated when the goal of these programs, by and large, that the working group looked at is to improve soil health, right? So why not just have a soil health payment, right? Why not just have a simple program that, tracks and records and compensates? And that's what the working group attempted to do for 3 years. And this with definitely eyes wide open about how many programs exist and how do we leverage the programs that are currently on the books to further advance the good work farmers are doing. And so in that way, right, CSP is kind of a new presentation to this body of farmers, but it's existed. It's the largest conservation program in the country, right? It just hasn't been well subscribed in Vermont. And so that was an intentional consideration is, all right, this is a new program to introduce that is new to Vermont that has a lot of funding opportunity, but we're all going to have to learn the ins and outs of what does it take to be eligible? When is the payment rate going to be worth your time, right? And it's just going to be like EQIP. It's going to be learning a new conservation program. And so to be candid that, yes, that's why we're trying to fund more technical assistance so that there's someone available to answer farmer questions, as well as making sure the farmers are compensated for their time to consider this program, right? That's where the first payment is introduced. You do some planning, you're going to get some compensation. This is other than the pay for phosphorus program, applying to EQIP or FAP, that incentive doesn't exist. And so it's not perfect, but I think, the intent is to try to understand whether CSP for agriculture is something that can work for Vermont. And we are going to need feedback, NRCS is going to need feedback, and it's going to be a learning process. I will say that the resources that exist today, both at the Agency of Ag and at partner organizations, whether it's NRCS, even Extension, VACD, the conservation districts, farmer watershed groups, right? The amount of funding and TA that's available is more than it's ever been in my experience in this for 15 years or so. So it's not perfect. And we looked at, how to consolidate programs, how to make them efficient. But if you're trying to target different program areas and you have the restrictions between capital and general fund monies and then grant funded monies from the federal government that come from EPA or come from NRCS, like that's why we have this alphabet soup is we're trying to meet the divergent needs of the agricultural community. And there is no silver bullet that doesn't leave a whole sector or group of farms out of a program. And so this is our best attempt to make it as simple as possible while trying to tackle the goal of improving soil health. And as you just pointed out, there's a lot of acronyms, and I don't know why we keep ending up in that place, but we'll see where we end up. But I appreciate that feedback, and you're exactly right. But to acknowledge that we tried to address that, but it's clearly a work in progress.
So will the
go ahead.
me, will the CSP program have any relativity at all to the payment for performance program? Are they totally independent of each other?
Totally separate. Yep.
And there will not be
CSP,
any overlay at all.
the PES working group recommended CSP and a state program to support CSP. And so that's going to use the NRCS framework, which uses CART and uses that federal construct. The pay for performance that pays for phosphorus is also funded by NRCS, but that's administered and looking at different specific resource concerns. And so applying for one doesn't preclude you from participating in the other, but information you put into one program isn't translated to the other, and because they're different assessment tools. And so that is, as we look at what is the future of the next step of ag conservation implementation, I think that's going to be part of the feedback, at least that I would like to hear, is which works better for Vermont, putting more money to making CSP work, or does pay for performance meet more farmers' needs? I don't know, but they are getting at different things, right? Pay for performance is just the cropland. CSP Assist, or CSP does the whole farm, right? It's not just the grazing pasture lands and the cropland. It also looks at associated ag land and the production area. And so it is more of a whole farm assessment, which is different from pay for performance.
If I may add, to address your comment, Dave, the conservation districts are one of the services that we're trying to provide uniformly is farm teams. So in my district in the White River, we coordinate technical service providers around one farm. And through that, developing a funding plan and really helping pull all these resources together with your team to, get the timing right, get the applications in. It's been really successful for us. We've helped, each individual farm access, anywhere up to 8 to 10 different grants over the course of a year, taking this team approach where we pull all your technical service providers into one meeting, even just once or twice a year, having this almost like a board meeting, and you're the CEO. And there are districts across the state who are doing this. I know Winooski, Franklin, Orleans, Windham, and my district, White River, and others are interested in expanding it. So I would say, no matter where you are, reach out to your conservation district and ask about farm teams, and they can even link you with another district who's running it if that's something that you feel like would help. And Heather, I see your hand.
Are you feeling that the conservation districts have gotten up to speed with these programs, or are qualified to be able to bring it to the farmers in each of the conservation districts, such as you have done?
Some of us have more focus on agriculture than others and more funding than others. And so I would say, but we all coordinate with each other. So for example, for me, Windsor County, the Ottaquechee district doesn't really cover agriculture. So my district covers agriculture in that county. So we work together. So I would say, if you want a farm team, we can get you a farm team to help coordinate. And yeah, we're working on it. We still don't have all the programs down ourselves, to be honest. I learn about stuff every day that I don't know about. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, and on the federal side, we've tried to streamline the application process. So it's just one application and you can enroll yourself into multiple programs. And if you don't know what program to be in, you can just check some programs off and we'll work with you to put you into the right program or the right initiative or the right funding source.
Other questions or comments? Nico.
Yes, this is a comment to Ryan mostly, maybe also to the NRCS, that it would be really great to get sort of a streamlined thinking in the state between the different agencies of who does what. With our CPPs run by 2 or 3 different agencies, we have We have, you know, the NRCS, we have the Department of Agriculture with the conservation districts. And, you know, I sort of second, it's not just the alphabet soup, it's the multiple times you have to take a run at data, at my own data coming into its new system for administration over and over and over and over again. And often the administrative burden on farmers in terms of what we get out of the grants is pretty significant. And you don't, free money is great, but it's also, we pay income tax on that. There are grants on, it's a perversion of federal tax law that this is considered income. I don't understand why. It seems like we're taxing the same money over and over again, but there's probably little we can do about that. But to be more cognizant of how many hours farmers and also the TA teams from this various technical advisors in the state. And I see this, you know, from all sorts of different organizational angles, how much time gets wasted, and therefore money that could go to farmers by having redundant input and, you know, administrative structures that are just inanely complex. It breaks my heart. We could probably have 25 to 30% more money actually going to the farms if we streamline the application and administrative process on the agencies and technical service provider sides. And the NRCS is as guilty as the Department of Agriculture when it comes to grants in doing that. Thanks.
Lyle?
Yeah, I had a question about the CSP Assist and how that's going to get ranked for farmers in accessing that. And if there is a certain, I don't know if I missed that part, but there's a limited amount of funding.
Yep. The reason why the working group has between $2,000 and $3,500 of payment is to ensure that every farmer this year and next year that applies to CSP that wants to apply the Agency of Ag program that qualifies and is in good standing and meets all those bureaucratic check boxes is able to receive that funding for planning and contract signing if they sign a contract. What's variable, and to make sure that we reach all farmers that apply, is that third practice incentive, right? That's what's going to change. If we have a lot of applicants, everyone's going to get less on the practice side. If we get fewer applicants, they'll get more on the practice side. But if you apply to NRCS and you submit to us on time, you will be, there isn't a ranking. It's first come, first served. And we'll make sure that folks that apply this year next are able to get those incentive payments.
Okay, thanks. And then I have one follow-up question is just to verify. So at what point can a CSP, how old could somebody who had a CSP 4 years ago get this payment? Or what's the farthest back CSP application can get this payment? You might have said that already. Sorry.
Sure. Happy to chat specifics offline. And there's always an exception no matter how much you plan, right? But if you have an active agreement, that's as far back as we're going to go. If you had an agreement 6 to 8 years ago, that's too old, right? It's for those that are applying to do planning this federal fiscal year and next federal fiscal year, and those that have active agricultural CSP agreement. So if you have a 4-year-old CSP ag agreement, that's probably still active for 1 more year. You would be eligible for that $3,500 payment for planning and for contract incentive. Not you, but someone who has a 4-year-old CSP ag agreement.
Got it. Thank you.
But if it's expired or lapsed, not eligible.
Thank you.
Bill, did you have a comment?
Yeah, thank you. I just think that I'm thinking along the same lines as Mr. Conant, sort of bewildered and bedazzled and everything else by all these terms. But I slowly will learn, and it takes time. But I was wondering, is this going to be archived? Is there some way that I can look at this again and save things on the chat, and also promote it a little more to other people so that if they weren't able to see this today, that they would be able to listen to it again and again and get a clear idea of who they should talk to. So I'm a little confused on how you go about coming back and re-watching this.
Yes, I will send out, I'm recording and I will send it out along with the links that have been provided in the chat.
Good.
Other questions?
Yeah, I had some questions regards to the communications that were sent out by the Vermont Ag Department in regards to this. Some are relatively clear, but there was also links to the NRCS new CSP applications, and it didn't specify which offices we should hand into, or when you print out the form, there's no mailing address essentially to do that. So that might be helpful information for people. I just sort of walked myself through the paperwork package just to see what's available, how easy is it and how clear is it, and that was one of the things that wasn't entirely clear. If you don't know where who your local NRCS agent or office is, the CSP stuff, does that go regionally, or is there central spot to send it to? So that might be helpful to clarify that for people.
Thanks, Travis. I'll connect with the team to make sure we try to clarify that. On our website, we'll put a link to NRCS's map and listing of the regional field offices, so folks can refer to that if they're not familiar.
Travis?
Yeah, thanks, Jennifer. Hi, everybody. Hey, I'm Travis Thomason, the state conservationist for NRCS here in Vermont. And I just want to say thanks to everybody for joining. And unfortunately, I was in a spot I couldn't get to Dave's question earlier about all the acronyms and the chaos of what this program seems to be, or at least all the federal programs. And Dave, I just want to say, we hear you loud and clear. Oftentimes this is challenging for our staff. And that's one thing for me, the responsible individual for NRCS here in Vermont. We try to do everything we can to keep it as simple as possible. I'm grateful for the Agency of Ag and helping us try and make this easier for producers. So Dave, please keep that feedback coming. We definitely want to try and make these programs as easy as possible. And I would say if you have questions, really one of the best things you can do is just reach out to your local USDA Service Center. You can Google NRCS USDA Service Centers, and it'll, depending on your location, show you which ones are close to you. And you can go to farmers.gov and find those also. And please, if you have any questions, reach out to us. That's probably the easiest thing to do, is just give us a call and we'll help you walk through the program. So thanks again, to the farmers groups for doing this. And we're just grateful to be hand in hand with the Agency of Ag and all of you to be here for Vermont. So thank you.
Thanks very much. So we scheduled this meeting till 7:15. If there are any other questions or comments, please speak now.
Hey, Jennifer. This is Mary Beth. I'll just add to Travis's comment in the fact that any office can take any application and we will help you get it to wherever it needs to go and hook you up with the right person. So whether you're in my area or not, I'm going to get you to the person or the people that can help you. So it does not matter. Oh, we're all intertwined. We all work together. We're one big team. So reach out. We're there.
Thank you.
Hey, this is
oh,
Brandon Bless. I joined late too, so you might have done this already. But and I could go back to the recording if you did. But one thing that may be helpful is could you like run us through an example of a farm in the application and maybe take us through like a 2, 3, 4, 5 year timeline and how you could pick one sort of practice area and how that would play out for that farm. And maybe associate some payments with it so we have some sense of cost, payments, and how many acres, etc. Just like a very easy number.
yeah, I wonder in terms of follow-up, Heather and the NRCS crew, if there are any visuals that we can send folks, and maybe I've seen some example farm, and Joe Buford just put in the chat farmers.gov to find your local service center. That'll be a great thing to send around as follow-up.
Jennifer, if I may, this is Joshua Allen, State Outreach Coordinator. So I have created a PowerPoint. It's called Life Cycle of an Application, and it does feature a specific section that has information on CSP, but it does, mention the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP, as well as other programs that NRCS offers. And it breaks down the whole process from establishing farm records with FSA to going through the application process and how that's received, the ranking process, payments, obligations, all of that. So I can arrange to have that sent to you first thing in the morning.
That's great. I'll include that. Nico?
Yeah, Brennan, I can spend in minutes and to share my experience. I'm now in the 3rd year of my CSP contract. It took 2 years to get in, to just get the application in the system, because at that point, almost nobody in the state knew how to do it. And I'm really enthused and hopeful with this renewed focus, or that both the state and the NRCS are giving CSP in especially having talked for so many years about ecosystem payments and stuff like that. This really addresses quite a bit of this. Once we got in, it acknowledged how much we are already doing in terms of practices. So there was very little additional stuff. It was more refocusing what we're doing on areas that needed it more, which was difficult, was one of the reasons we hadn't done that. And I'm speaking specifically about bale grazing to address invasives and poor fertility on very steep slopes where it's hard to get machinery to. And so I was positively surprised how few practice changes we had to do in running our farm, and how much reward was given for what we're already doing and have been doing for years. So that was a very positive part of it. The payments are pretty substantial. We're doing bale grazing on about 45 acres with the prescribed thing, and a few sort of wildlife biohabitat things like putting up nesting boxes for specific species and stuff. And the payments for that are right around $10,000 a year for 3 years. And the first year was sort of a partial year and was, less, was like 4 or something like that. So that was the 4-year sort of rotation, just to give folks an overview of sort of, what is this worth it? Yes, it was worth it. And it looks like the agencies and the state are much better organized now and are really wanting to make this happen, which hopefully will reflect in both the expertise and technical advising being available, as well as sort of a better oiled machinery in the background. This was also during the time when the NRCS was going through really deep structural changes in terms of the personnel available and stuff like that. So I'm really looking forward to how this plays out. I'm excited about it. And yes, I would encourage people to go for it. It's worth it. In terms of the administrative, this was one of the easier, once we were in the CSP and the technical advisors had figured out how to enter this stuff and run it through the machinery, so to speak. The actual implementation of the programs and administration of the programs has been pretty smooth and relatively non-disruptive to what we have to do in our daily things. And we see positive environmental impacts from it with what we're doing. So that's just a quick sort of sideline comment from somebody who's been in this for a few years now.
Thank you very much. That's helpful. And I wonder, Paul and Brian and Scott, I know some, maybe all of you have CSP. If you have anything you'd like to share, your wins and woes in regard to this program to encourage people, it'd be helpful.
I think this will be the 4th year that I'm in now. There was a little bit of a bump in the road to begin with because it was a new adventure for the person who was helping me implement it. And also there's been a couple of glitches in the software. So the payment didn't come when it was supposed to, but I'm not blaming anybody for that. I did not implement a lot of extra practices because the person going through the process with me wanted to make sure it got done correctly on the 1 or 2. We did invasive species. And now we're having to use other funds because that program does not help clean up the invasive species. We did have to use pesticides. Goats weren't an option. And the cleanup, the stuff that's left there has got to be something done to it. And right now, NRCS has no program for that. So working through Lyle and Jennifer, I've been able to get funds to clean up the brush and the debris that was left over from the Roundup spraying.
Yeah, I think we're in. Sorry, go ahead, Scott, if you want.
Yeah, so I signed up last fall just because I was in the working group and I knew we're headed in this direction. So I wanted to learn more about the program and then be able to give input. So we enrolled some of our acres, just what we had under our control for the next 5 years, which is just our own land. And they did the assessment, NRCS did, and we signed this spring. I think we're still in that process. I don't know if I have a final go yet, but we did the assessment and I chose 2 enhancements. We're going to add a buffer strip on a place that needs a buffer strip anyway. And we're going to add, I think, birdhouses on that land. So pretty easy things to do. One of them needed to be done anyway for sure. And then we had some existing practices already in place that we should receive funding for. I'm still gray on what the final numbers are. I kind of did it as a learning experience just to see where we were going to land and to be able to provide some input. So that's where we're at.
Yeah, I think we're in our 4th year also, along with like Paul. And there was some learning curves. I think our NRCS field person was fairly new to the CSP. I don't think she had implemented it before. So there was a learning curve there. But we did a couple practices. We're doing a bee pollinator habitat on a piece of acreage that is challenging to get to. So I decided we would do that. We're doing the bird houses, some wildlife corridors, and then a barnyard roof runoff project. So we have multiple practices that we're doing. And yeah, the payments, are generous, I feel, for what we're doing. So it's all in all, it's smoothed out the last couple of years and it's been a positive program.
That's all really helpful to hear. If there are any additional questions or responses, it'd be great to hear from you. Fantastic.
I have one quick comment on that, and I think we had an open invite at some point a few months ago, in where the NRCS reached out to farmers for suggestions of practices to fund that would work well in our area that might be included in future CSP offerings. And I think that's a really really valuable feedback cycle for the NRCS, but also for the farmers to sort of understand a little bit better. So I think working on that a little bit more and giving us more opportunities to sort of come out and say, hey, this is what we've been doing, maybe the ripso stuff that Abe and those guys are doing up north in Franklin County, maybe that's something that can be folded into something. So encourage innovative conservation practices that really improve soil health, that we're all or a lot of the people here on the call are interested in that, and have dabbled with experimenting stuff, and it would be great to sort of take those results and bring them and say, hey, let's actually get paid for this stuff in a different way. So I think that's an interesting feedback cycle to focus on in the future of these discussions, in some form where we could have a forum where we can give feedback on what actually works and where we would like to see more funding to make it more worthwhile. Thanks.
Thank you all. Well, with that, I think we'll close. Please reach out to me or the NRCS or the Agency of Ag or the conservation districts if you want assistance. And thank you to the Farmers Alliances. We're really appreciative of your leadership and involvement. It's invaluable. Anything to close, Paul or Brian or Scott? We'll leave it at that. Great. Well, 7:15, that's God's perfect timing right there. Thank you all so much. Thanks, Ryan. And thank you, Heather, for presenting.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
Have a great
everyone.
evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. Bye. Good to see you.
Bye-bye.